Showtime! The Capital G show starts right now.
What's up YouTube, Capital G here. Today we're going to be looking at one of Yu-Gi-Oh's biggest problems. No, I'm not talking about broken cards and mechanics or even short printing and rarity bumps. I'm talking about cheating. It's something that honestly not just affects Yu-Gi-Oh but every card game, and Konami themselves have even gone so far in an attempt to thwart this that they often display cheaters in a negative light and kind of have a sentiment in the anime and manga that cheaters never win or prosper. So today we'll be looking at some of the most common ways that cheaters get their bandit key phone in a video I'm calling the top 10 most common ways Yu-Gi-Oh players cheat, the Yu-Gi-Oh hierarchy. Now just to be clear, I will be talking about things that are not up for interpretation, like breaking a gentleman's agreement to side out certain cards. Everything on this list is 100% against the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh if done intentionally, and we'll be listing them not just by the severity of the crime but how often it generally happens in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. With that said, let's begin. Number 10, setting monsters in your spell and trap zones. We start off our list with a pretty obscure entry, and that's because the one deck that can truly exploit this type of cheating is All But Dead. During the 5Ds and Zexal eras, it wasn't unheard of for people to set their monsters in their back row in an attempt to empty out their hand while playing Infernity. Usually going off with the deck meant winning, and on the off chance that your opponent used spell and trap destruction on your set card, you could just pretend that it was a devastating blow that you had been dealt and scoop it up. After all, who's going to question an opponent who just forfeited? Thank goodness that the release of the artifacts largely coincided with the death of the Infernity, otherwise we could seriously be having an issue. Number 9, not paying life point costs to activate effects. This one is pretty seldom and it's actually very difficult to prove intent, but the benefits for not properly taking into account life points paid early in the duel to activate certain card effects is pretty obvious. Costs are meant to balance cards and give them a certain level of risk, and in Yu-Gi-Oh, life points are invaluable because they're extremely difficult to gain back when extinguished. Being able to take one more additional attack before death or activate another card that requires a life point payment is something that can be game changing or even save your entire tournament life. Number 8, lying about how cards work. Yu-Gi-Oh can be an extremely complicated game. We all know this, especially with constant erratas and problem-solving text updates. And when it's fairly common for players to routinely play cards in different languages, you better believe when there's an advantage to be gained, people have and will continue to misrepresent how cards work or simply the card effect entirely. What's worse is this method is usually employed against younger players as they are more inclined to believe what their opponent tells them, and mid-duel they may not have the means to actually check certain cards to electronic devices. Number 7, bribery. I kind of struggled on where to put this one, to be honest. It could easily be the most common offense on this entire list, but at the same time, most of the Yu-Gi-Oh community, myself included, consider this largely a victimless crime. One player gets the win while the other receives compensation, and it may give one player an accomplishment that they may not have earned without it, but at the same time, it's the only entry on this list where both players are fully aware of the situation. With that being said, why I might not think that bribery is a big deal, Konami is a different story. They have outright suspended YCS winners for such acts. Number 6, drawing extra cards. I've said it once and I'll say it again. In Yu-Gi-Oh, draw power is win power, and having the faster deck is always going to be seen as an advantage. In previous years where decks were full of draw cards such as Teledad and you could blow through a third of your deck, or in formats where you had insanely powerful draw cards that were legal at the time, such as Mirage of Nightmare and Card of Safe Return, drawing extra cards was quite common. Snagging an extra card when you've already drawn 4 to 5 cards in that turn already was pretty difficult to notice for players who didn't have a keen eye. Even players who have competed in the Yu-Gi-Oh World Championship have admitted to doing this. I'm looking at you, Roy St. Clair. Number 5, attempting the normal summon twice. This is easily the one that inadvertently happens the most on this list. As Yu-Gi-Oh adds new summoning mechanics such as the pendulum summon, turns can get excessively relatively longer, and it can be difficult to remember if the turn player has used their normal summon or not. With the advent of monarchs, this problem has actually been exacerbated, and that's simply because the squires give you additional normal summons, and also monarchs can even incorporate things like Gem Knight, Seraph Knight. It can seriously be a chore figuring out how many normal summons they're going to do that turn, let alone how many normal summons they actually have access to. Now, I'm pretty sure that this has been done maliciously tons of times for gain, but this is also the one that almost every duelist in the world can say that they've unknowingly broken dozens of times. Number 4, marking sleeves, an older tactic employed by My Valentine on the original Yu-Gi-Oh series. During the GX era, when the game was filled with many generic game-breaking cards that could easily fit into most meta decks, marking sleeves was easily the cheat method of choice. Indentations on the back of sleeves, bent corners, even smudges could easily tell a well-trained duelist what card was on top of their deck before it was ever drawn. Therefore, they would have the insight to know how they should play against their opponent during their turn and how they should allocate their resources before drawing said card. Number 3, using teammates and friends to look at your opponent's hand. Esper. You guys remember him? He was an annoying, terrible little character who left an annoying, terrible little legacy on the game. Probably the most difficult form of cheating to prevent. What makes this so unstoppable when done correctly is it's almost impossible to detect. At premier events, it's extremely common for players to stand around and watch other duelists duel, so how you know that the guy standing behind you is actually feeding information to your opponent about your hand is beyond me. In fact, this method has actually grown stronger over the years with the advancement of technology. Now what may appear to be your opponent checking a simple ruling or their life points on their phone could actually be them getting a text message with all the info on your hand and set cards revealed to them. Number 2, stalling and intentional slow play. This could be the single most annoying and frustrating thing on this entire list, and it's used for a couple of reasons. Depending on the situation, the reason generally varies. The first is to forcibly move the game to sudden death, where you can assume a turtle-like defensive position and essentially just win the duel with maybe 1 or 2 burn cards. Others involve playing slow after losing game 1 in hopes of winning game 2 so that the game can end in a draw where you would obviously receive 1 point instead of the 0 points that you receive in a loss. And finally, to our number 1, stacking the deck. In my personal opinion, why this may only be the second most commonly used method of cheating, it is without a doubt the most notorious and has actually seen some evolution throughout the years. Through the GX era, it was actually quite common for players to attempt to cut their most powerful cards, usually which were marked, and put them on top of their deck, ensuring that they would have extremely strong opening hands. But finally, when Konami addressed this cheating epidemic and initiated the final cut rule, which mandated that your opponent would receive the final cut or shuffle of your deck, cheaters then set their sights on their opponent's decks instead. This led to players attempting to see the bottom card of their deck and put that card on top of their deck or at the bottom of their deck, depending on what the card was. Powerful limited cards such as Regeki and Heavy Storm were of course left at the bottom of the deck, where their opponent would have next to no chance of opening with those, while other cards that were not particularly good against them or cards that were not good standalone were definitely shuffled to the top in an effort to of course sabotage their opponent's opening hand. So let me know what you guys think. What's your favorite Bandit Keith method of cheating? Leave that in the comment section below, and if there were any methods that I missed, leave that also in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, hit that thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you haven't. Subscribing makes life happy.